Hello, everyone. This is Yvonne and Lyle. Welcome to our true crime podcast today.
Come on right along, let me tell you a tale.
Hey, welcome back to WTBL. I'm Yvonne, and this is
Lyle,
he's my husband.
we've been together for a little while. So
Yeah, we kind of finish each other's sentences there.
exactly.
Anyway, today's podcast, we're going to talk about all the serial killers, the notorious ones that most everyone will recognize, or right here from Washington State, which is kind of creepy.
Yeah, the Pacific Northwest really has an aura about it, and people know it because of there's jokes out there both in the writing circles and news reportings, and basically says, if you want to be a singer, go to Nashville. If you want to be in finance, go to New York City. But if you want to be a serial killer,
Yeah,
come to
Washington.
come to the Pacific Northwest. There you go.
Yeah, which it's not really funny. I don't know why I'm laughing. I laugh when I'm nervous, but it's kind of grim, really.
It is.
And there's several theories out there about why this is, and we're going to go into a couple of them today. I don't know if either one of them is true, but of course, if anyone knows about Seattle, it was a hot spot back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. So they were companies that were doing smeltering.
Right. Well, yeah, there's a lady out there by the name of Caroline Fraser who wrote a book called Murderland, and she looks at these different theories. And I think that we want to say the same thing right up front is that all of these theories
They're just theories.
They're theories, and they should not be looked as an excuse as to
No.
why these guys commit these crimes, because that kind of lets them off the hook. And that is not what these theories are about. It's just
No.
an attempt to explain why it might be higher in those areas.
Right. So one part was called the Aroma of Tacoma, and they had one huge copper smelter.
Yeah, the company was Osarco.
RCO.
No, Arco owned
Oh.
the one in Anaconda,
Oh, okay.
Montana.
Yeah.
And the other one had a very similar name. It was Osarco. But
Anyway,
either
they
way,
both were almost identical, and they both ran for like 100 years. But anyway, in that theory in the Tacoma area, when they tested like the dirt on top, not digging down deep, just on top from the fallout from these, huge well, what were they? They weren't smokestacks.
yeah, they were smokestacks where the smelter was refining the copper and such, and it would put pollutants into the air, and then it settled
settles
out.
down, kind of like a fallout.
Exactly.
Anyway, we were looking up, I'll look at my notes down here to get it right. In the area where Ted Bundy lived and played as a child, when they tested it, it was anywhere from 280 to 620 parts per million. And to put that into perspective, even the low end of the 280 in today's date, I don't know if you guys ever watched ET or whatever, but you remember when they rolled in with all the people in hazmat suits, and that's what would go on to clean these areas up as they would go in with hazmat, take all that dirt out and clean these areas up. And that wasn't done at that point. They later do. And what did you say they called it?
Well, most of these areas are called Superfund cleanup sites because the contamination is so bad that the government has recognized that there are some health risks with living in these areas. The pollution is so bad.
Right. There's lots of cancers. And now they're saying there could be a tie to serial killers or just maybe attitudes or moral judgment.
Right.
It affects the frontal part of the brain.
Right. The part that would make you think about what is morally correct or I should or I shouldn't do this
Right.
is affected, and it's basically damaged by the high concentrations of lead.
Right.
And so there were several serial killers, not just Ted Bundy,
No.
but the Green River Killer.
Exactly.
There was even noted that Charles Manson spent some time in prison there.
Right. And Robert Yates, he was from Spokane, and we'll get into these guys a little bit later. So that was one theory. The other theory is, I don't know, it's more of a comical one, I think, is if you've ever been to Seattle, it rains all the time. It's rainy, it's cloudy, you don't get that many sunshiny days. There's a vitamin D deficiency in everyone, so they're like that. People just snap. They can't take it anymore.
Yeah, it's
And
very gloomy.
yeah, but once again, I think if you believe these, then you're kind of giving the killers a little bit of an excuse, and I don't buy that.
Well, you got to look at it. There's a difference between correlation and causation. So,
Right.
correlation being the fact that, okay, you've got these things going on, and maybe in these areas where there's less sun and
Mhm.
there's a correlation there. But that doesn't necessarily cause someone to make the wrong decision and do these terrible acts. Yeah.
Exactly. It can make you be a bit depressed,
Right.
but I don't think you should be just going off on tangents and killing people.
Exactly. Well, so in the 1970s, all the way up through the year 2000, is called the golden age for serial killers. And
Right.
that isn't just the Pacific Northwest, that's
No.
all over.
Right.
Um, but these guys flourished. And it was around the time that these smelters were being closed down. Um,
It was, and I think people were coming to realize how dangerous they were, and maybe they didn't lead to such great, even though they were doing things with copper, it wasn't a good outcome for the people who lived around there.
yeah, I don't think that obviously that's probably the beginning of the environmental movement with
Mhm.
whether you agree with that or not. I mean, people were kind of living in areas that pollution was so bad. At the same time, I look back to the earlier days of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and like you look on the eastern half of the United States where all the coal mines were.
Right.
You think of the environmental damage that was done there, and people lived in that, and we don't see a higher concentration of serial killers there
They did say that Los Angeles was more of a hot spot. It was the highest one for serial killers in the United States?
in the
In the
world.
world. Oh,
The
wow.
Los Angeles is the serial killer capital of the world.
There's a
Yeah,
reason.
because the United States has been tracking this stuff for years, where a lot of other countries don't.
That's
So
true.
our numbers could be kind of skewed to show that having all of these serial killers here in the United States, other places could have just as many. They're just not tracking it.
Right.
You know,
Right, that's true. Well, there's another reason why these serial killers were getting away with so much of this stuff. And it's been known for quite a while. I think we've even mentioned it once or twice in our previous podcast. Is the police, they didn't have any kind of system to talk to each other or share information. So, say for us, we had a podcast where there was a crime in Idaho, which is from where we live very close
right?
to the Spokane area. And those people didn't really talk to each other a lot. They did eventually come together. If you commit a crime in another county or another state right across the line, and then you drive to another one, you're probably going to get away with it a little bit more back then because there was no communication, no way for these people to share their information.
Yeah, when you look at the serial killers in the 70s and 80s, most of these are happening in large urban areas where exactly that. People, they aren't talking back and forth. You think about it, if a murder happened out in the middle of nowhere in Kansas, people probably heard about that for miles
Mhm.
around. But you get in some place like Los Angeles, and if they don't have, there's Los Angeles is actually made up of numerous little cities
Right.
and if they don't speak with one another or communicate, that information isn't being shared. It's pretty easy for someone to go from area to area and not have their crimes correlated.
And we'd like to state that they didn't talk, not because they didn't want to, but there wasn't a system set up so that they could share information. And that's where HITS comes into play. And it's really a good thing. And actually, it's been expanded now to where it's somewhat almost worldwide, but at least US wise.
Right. So HIT started in the state of Washington, Homicide Investigation Tracking System with the Attorney General's Office and the Department of Justice. Um,
Supposedly, it was a couple of guys down in a
the basement.
basement that were working on this. And when they got it going, they shared it with the
Right.
DOJ.
So the Washington State puts together hits and starts tracking all of these. And now if a homicide happened in Spokane, it could be correlated with, say, one that happened down in Colfax
Mhm.
or in Cowlitz County or other areas of the state that might not necessarily have direct communication all the time.
Yeah, it's pretty spot on right now, but we want to get into a little bit of this is when they were coming up with this hits. Let me get to my notes where I have the info. So it started out as a 467 fields of information that they wanted these detectives to fill out, and it was a where is that? How many
It's a 54-page document.
54-page document. So here you are, you or one of your colleagues, you've been working on something 24 hours, no sleep, a little bit of coffee, not much food. And they come and they hand you this 54-page document that they want you to fill out, which they said on the average took 2.3 hours
Right.
to fill out. Well, look, these guys are exhausted. There's all these questions. They're like, yeah, no, we're not doing this. I'm exhausted. I'm going home for the night. So it started out as basically a nightmare and it wasn't working. So they refined it down to where it took them about 30 minutes and the first computer was a 5340, which you're probably familiar with that. I'm not.
It's yeah, I mean, they called it a microcomputer, but it really probably was about the size of a room.
Yeah, it's
And it
not so micro compared to today.
exactly, it was, one that the Washington State had purchased for this program.
Mhm.
And they had a good idea in the beginning of like this 54-page document and all these fields because they wanted to get some academic information about
Mhm.
it too, so that they could study serial killers or homicides. But yeah, like you said, it wasn't
It wasn't feasible, like, these guys couldn't put all these hours in and then start in on another document. They were more trying to solve a murder.
right.
And so when they knocked it down to 30 minutes and they started including things like Department of Corrections arrest reports and they sex offenders, gangs, the migration, the victim types, where it happened, what they used as a murder weapon. So they knocked it down to those kind of questions. The detectives were able to fill these in pretty quickly. And all of a
Right.
sudden, you type in some information and you've got a murder suspect.
Yeah. So what they did was they brought this down to the basic victimology of
Mhm.
how this crime happened. And then what detectives could do is simply look for a homicide that's very similar to one that they're investigating and see if their suspects might have been in the same area.
And so we have in our notes here, there was two specific ones that were found when they finally dialed this hits thing in. There was one, was that right here in the Spokane
Yeah.
area? It was a hobo and he was stabbed in a train yard. And the witness that came forward and said, oh man, I saw this happen. Well, guess what? They took his info, they dialed it into hits, and he popped up as the number one suspect.
And the reason he popped up as a suspect was because he had claimed to be a witness in another homicide of the exact same type in a different jurisdiction. And Spokane never would have known that if it
No,
hadn't been for the HITS program.
right.
So this is just like one example. And over the years, now HITS has been responsible for helping correlate and put together numerous homicides across the state of Washington.
Right. There's another one in the very beginning where it was this federal agent who was undercover and he was listening to some guys and that he was bragging about killing two people. And so this undercover agent goes to hits and tells them all this information. And then this girl pops up as a victim who was raped and almost killed, but she got the description of the guy and what his MO was. And so they took that information along with what the undercover agent said, and it popped up this suspect.
Those are just a couple of examples of what has been done to correlate murders and bring about kind of a reduction in the serial killers uh, in the Pacific Northwest. We hope that you're enjoying today's podcast.
And if you are, please like, subscribe, and share. Okay, so we're going to get into the serial killers that most everyone will recognize their names.
Right.
The first one was Ted Bundy. Obviously, he was raised around the Tacoma area, and he is known for 30 murders that we know of. Could be more.
Right. And I would say with all of these, the numbers that we throw out are one numbers that they were either convicted or are known. But
Or
some of these guys actually, there's
did,
probably a lot more.
yeah. And then there was Gary Ridgway, who was known as the Green River Killer. And he was known for at least 49.
Right. He was convicted of 49.
Right. Then there was Charles Manson, and we didn't look up how many that he murdered, and he spent time in prison.
He was up here in the Washington area, but most of his time was spent down in California.
Okay, so then we're at the I-5 corridor killer, Randall Woodfield. This guy was a little different. Him and Bundy, actually, somewhat polite, good looking. This guy was very good looking. He was a star athlete.
He was a draft pick for the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah. He was also a candidate for Playgirl model.
Right. Very handsome, outgoing guy.
Yeah.
And Ted Bundy was rather politically active.
Mhm.
He had worked in those circles, very affluent.
Right. So Randall Woodfield was known for 44 victims, probably more. His was so different because, well, I think Bundy's was a little bit too, because they both kind of killed on the I-5. It connected California to Oregon to Washington. And so this guy, Randall, was killing people, or at least abducting them and then killing them and then driving to his next job.
Yeah, and the interesting part is that these type of murders are exactly what spurred the hits program,
Right.
because their murders are spread out so far that no one is communicating and able to put them together.
It was hard to. Okay, so let's get back. Robert Yates, who was from Spokane, he was actually a family guy, had 5 kids, a wife. He was in the Air Guard, was it?
Army National Guard is
Army
a
National. He was a helicopter pilot.
Right,
This guy, there was some creepy stuff about him. He mostly targeted prostitutes.
right. The first 2 homicides that he's known to have committed actually took place back in the 70s, and it was a man and a woman out in a wilderness setting that he came across, supposedly while he was out hunting or fishing. But later on, when he's truly acting as a serial killer, it's mostly all prostitutes in the Spokane area, with some over on the west side of Washington. And as a
Also,
as a helicopter pilot, he did spend some time overseas, and
yeah,
we
he
don't
was
know.
in Somalia and Haiti.
Mhm.
And actually, I think there's suspect that he killed somebody over there.
Right.
So anyway, this guy, one of the creepier things that he did is one of the ones that he killed, one of the ladies he killed here in Spokane, he buried her underneath his bedroom window and then planted flowers over top of her. His
Right.
whole family is out there around this.
When he would kill one of the ladies, he would take them out somewhere, typically throw them alongside in a ditch somewhere. But one particular prostitute by the name of Melanie Murphin, he brought her back to his house and buried her under his window. He ended up entering into a plea agreement to avoid the death penalty. And part of that plea agreement was that he had to show the police where he had disposed of her body. And no one knew up until the day of uh, this plea agreement going through where she was at. And he led the police to his house where they had already been and searched,
Right.
and then
But they
told him,
probably didn't use cadaver dogs, I don't
right,
think. And
no,
like I said, it was under his window, but he planted flowers over. And there was one other disturbing fact, which I don't think was too well known. And I don't know if your little kids don't listen to this, but he used to stand in the window and masturbate
yeah.
over.
which
or down below.
yeah, some of those things though aren't that unusual of serial killers is that there is a sexual
Right.
portion of the killing that then sometimes excites them. And so they will revisit the locations of either the act of killing or where they've disposed of the body.
And I think it was proven that he had gone back and visited numerous of the ones until they were found.
Right.
Anyway, I don't know if I mentioned his was 16. Then there was the DC sniper, which was kind of weird because obviously DC is on the other side of the country. His name was John
John
Allen
Allen.
Muhammad,
Yeah,
and he was stationed here in Fort Lewis.
right.
Yes. Yeah.
He was active duty in the Army and then left Fort Lewis and ended up back in Washington, D.C. But while here in Washington State, he met another man, Malvo. They end up participating in this scheme together
Well, they're sniping people, obviously, his name.
along the D.C.'s freeways, at least 17 victims that he
Yes.
killed and 10 others that were injured.
Prosecution's theory was that he did this spree of murders so that he was planning on killing his ex-wife
Right.
so that he could get custody of the children. And if he killed her along with all these others, it would be looked at as just another sniper
A
incident.
coincidence rather
Yeah,
than a specific plot to kill her.
right. So those are the ones that are known. There's lots more. Like we said, there was
Oh,
up to 300 and some, but those are the ones I think that a lot of people might recognize.
yeah. Myself and my partner at the time, Detective Dresbeck, it was his case, actually. I mean, we worked on one that was kind of unusual here and ended up solving it with a male by the name of Douglas Perry, who then transitioned to be known as Donna Perry, and had killed at least 3 prostitutes here in the Spokane area. The
Weird
inter-
weird fact about that is when he was questioned, um, he said, "Well, I didn't do that." Du what did
Douglas did.
Doug
When he was questioned, he was Donna, and he said, "I don't know what Douglas did."
that doesn't compute.
What we did was we called the behavioral science unit
Right.
at the FBI in Quantico, Virginia, and asked for their assistance in how to question him. And so they gave us some tips on how to do that. And Detective Dresbeck and then another detective by the name of Burbridge went in and questioned him. And yeah, that was probably one of the more astonishing moments of when they asked him about killing. He said, "Well, I don't know what Douglas did. I didn't do anything,"
But
referring to himself or herself as Donna.
but when you referred to the psychologist, that's not how that works. He fully was aware of it.
Oh, absolutely.
He was just trying to use that to get out of it.
The other interesting little fact about that was that from the behavioral science unit, they said that this was the first transgender, transsexual individual they'd known of to be a serial killer at that point in
That
time.
they know of, yeah.
Right,
Now we'll get back to talking a little bit more about kids. So what they called it not being able to communicate was a linkage blindness.
right. So many of these agencies didn't have regular communication, and especially if you were separated by a little bit of distance, like you said, from Spokane to the other side of the state, you
Right.
wouldn't know what's going on. I visited a small county, northern part of Washington state, and it was kind of interesting there because we went to the city police to inquire about an individual we were trying to investigate. And they basically told us they wouldn't cooperate with our investigation. Uh,
County to city, that's
right.
kinda sad.
And then we went over to the county sheriff's office and they kind of outlined how much political tension there was. So just because of politics,
Mhm.
they wouldn't cooperate in homicide investigation. And that is very sad because the fact is these things are important to the family members that want to see it solved. A computer program, as long as they are willing to put the information in, has no political ties that
Right.
way. And hopefully it helps solve these crimes.
And without hits and being able to punch in this information, humans just don't have the capacity, the brain power to be able to search through tons and tons and tons of the information. Like you said, from county to county, state to state, there's no way a person could do this.
Right. One of the examples would be like in the old days,
Yeah.
mugshots would be the way you would do it. And so,
You recognize this person,
right,
you
you
know?
would have a victim come in and they would start flipping through thousands of photographs trying to identify a suspect. But when hits came along, basically then you had a computer program that would do a lot of the sorting for you. So you said the suspect was 6 foot tall and blonde hair and blue eyes, and it would automatically disregard all of the guys that are 5'2" and black hair, and it would just get rid of all of those mugshots.
Narrows it down because you look at so many after a while, you don't remember anything. You're like, well, now I don't know. I don't know what you look like.
Right.
Oh,
And the thing is, they call it modus operandi or MO, and most killers will select one
method.
method and they're going to stick with it because it works for them. And so a lot of these serial killers, you'll see them use the same weapon over and over. So if it's
Uh,
a 25 caliber or a 9 millimeter, a lot of times they aren't going to switch up the weapons and switch to a different caliber because that's the gun that they're comfortable with. It's worked for them in the past and they continue to use it. So it does help in narrowing some of these down.
True. I'm really glad that we have this now. It's such a different world that we live in. I know that when I've talked to you and other people when it comes to trying to hire people for a new job, everyone, especially the younger generation, is growing up with a phone or screen in front of them. They don't know how to interact between people. And it's kind of leading us to a different kind of thing. We're replacing the aroma of Tacoma with this she
Glow of the screen.
yeah, there you go. Glow
Mm,
of the screen. And is this gonna be a bad thing?
there's a difference between the causation and the correlation. And definitely, that author, Fraser, she had tried to correlate the lead poisoning or the lead pollution
Mhm.
to what was going on. And I think that someday down the road, we'll have psychologists and such that are going to then look at what the people today are going through and say, well, was this the cause of our mental illnesses and all of those things? Because when you get right down to it, a lot of these serial killers do have some kind of mental instability going on.
A lot of them have bad family lives,
Exactly.
tragic things that happen to them themselves. Look at the whole Hitler thing. He had all kinds of things. He had syphilis, he had a bad family life, he had all kinds of things, but, um, who knows what really pushed him over the edge.
Right. Well, and there too is there's been a number of books out there written on serial killers, whether here in America, the Pacific Northwest, or worldwide. And they all come back to there was something off about the person that did this. They're narcissistic most times. They have some type of mental issue. But what caused that? Is it just their family life or is it environmental impacts? Like we were talking about the pollution or the
Yeah,
screen
or
time.
the screen. Well, you think about it nowadays, little kids, probably as young as 2, 3 years old, they're getting their first screen, whether it's a learning device or a phone, their mom and dad's. But what all is that impacting young brains that are being developed?
Yeah, when I was growing up, we lived way out in the sticks
So
and
did
we
we.
had 3 channels, and I would bet, my weekly screen time, for television probably only added up to a couple of hours because even when you did watch television, it was so staticky.
Yeah.
You had to go outside and turn
Hey.
the antenna. I mean, it was it was like there was static or the screen would roll,
Yeah.
constantly, and,
We lived in New Mexico and we were in a trailer and we had an antenna and it was right outside the front door. So one of us kids would hang outside and hang onto that and dad'd be like, turn it left. Nope, turn it
turn it right,
right.
yep.
And we lived so far out in the sticks that I mean, we had electricity and stuff, but we had no telephone. If you needed to call somebody, we had to drive about 10 miles into town.
Yep.
And no, yeah, the screen time was maybe we would watch a movie at night. There was no watching television during the afternoon. Us kids were out playing. Now, when we moved, it was a little bit different,
Well,
but
and today's day and age, we get updates when there's like this
yeah,
large
yeah,
solar flare or
yeah.
something like
You
that.
go out and see the Northern Lights.
Yeah, but and they say, well, this might interfere with your internet or something to that effect. Well, obviously, those things were going on back in the '70s too, and so there were certain nights where you couldn't watch television
Wow.
because the signal just wasn't there, or whatever. But fast forward from then till
Oh
today,
my
and
goodness.
I get updates on my phone, every week that say, "Well, this past week you spent
Spit this
X
many
number of
hours.
hours of screen time," and
I
it
hate
is
those notifications.
it's amazing how much time. And I wouldn't even say I'm as prolific at it as my kids are
Oh,
or
no,
the
I'm
kids that
not.
are coming up
No.
today. If they're having a conversation, and the three of them will be in the room and they're all on their phones for the entire
They're not
time.
talking, they're texting.
Yeah, they'll text back and they'll be in the same room and
I
text
know.
back and forth. So,
Oh my
you know,
gosh. We tried to go to it like Thanksgiving and stuff. Put your phones away. Everyone was sit down and have dinner and no phones.
and the thing is, obviously not everyone who spends a ton of time on their phone or something is going to end up being a serial killer, but it definitely is having an influence on the way that we react as a society.
Well, I think not to get too far out there, but the games that some of these kids play too. I mean, they're violent games, and if you get used to carrying a gun around and blowing people away,
Right.
um, does that lessen? Like if you do it to a real person, is that you know?
Yeah, I mean, you do have to wonder about what that is doing to
Yeah.
their development, and their empathy towards their fellow human and that kind of thing. It's like, does it cheapen it, lessen it? I would say for some people it probably does. For others, maybe it has no effect. Those are some interesting things to think about as we walk away from this conversation about the serial
Thoughts to leave you
yeah,
with.
serial murderers in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, and like we say, there is some thoughts as to why ours are higher. It could be like we said earlier because we record it more in the United States. But who knows? We do know that we were definitely a hot spot.
Right. Yes, we were. So, I think that serial murder as a whole is not as frequent. Like they said, that was between '70s to 2000 was the golden age, but now people are tracked so much more.
Oh yeah, there's no such thing as privacy, Mark.
Between cell phones and surveillance
Ring
cameras, and
cameras.
yeah, perhaps that's a good thing in the fact of when you think of a serial killer, they're more likely to be caught and stopped early in life. But
Right. It's
who
good,
knows?
but it's also bad.
Yeah, you give up a lot for that little bit of
There needs to
extras.
be some kind of a balancing thing, but I don't know how you do that.
Well, we thank you all out there for coming along with us on the ride this week. And if you have any comments or anything for us, please leave them in the comment section below or contact us and let us know what your thoughts are.
With that, we'll bid you a goodbye and a God bless
God bless and
us
hopefully
all.
see you next week. Bye.